Hello ladies and gentlemen, Dave Dobbs here. It's Thursday the 10th of October 2024 and we've got the next big flyby coming in, and this is going to be a really big video because I've got a lot of subjects to touch in this video. I'm just going to warn you in advance because it's going to be a big convoluted story, and I'm going to bring together a lot of bits in my whole narrative. You know, when I wrote Laughing Gas and I published that back in 2011, you know, that was a published book in 2011, 2012 really. It was I released it in chapter by chapter around about 2011, and then released it as a whole book on the summer solstice in 2012. In it, you know, this guy Dobbs, tortured by this vision of seeing his country, Britain, being used as the Trojan horse to break up the European alliance and feed Europe into a war against Russia. You know, all leveraged by a massive war to unite the religious aspects of humanity, to unite in a massive war to make this big thing happen, make this big catalyst happen. And just reading you from the back of Laughing Gas, Dobbs is unwittingly becoming an undercover psychic detective on the trail of the greatest gold robbery ever conceived. So large, in fact, it's taken quite some time, millennia, in fact, to put everything in place. Now it seems all the thieves have to do in this romantic and deeply obscure psychedelic thriller is blow the safe door. But that's not as easy as it might sound. There's only one thing powerful enough to bust through the walls of this time-locked, vaulted world, and that's karma. If you can harness enough of it and apply it at the right time in the right place, well, karma, mixed in with the essential ingredients, what's that? Pain and fear, then the doors can be blown clean off its hinges. Sorry, the light's going in here a little bit, so I'm going to have to probably adjust the colour of this whole thing because I'm losing the light, or switch on a floodlight, which is on a bit of a strobe thing. And then I'm going to have a few problems with this video, so I'm you know, with lighting, and I've got a few things lined up, but they're all compromising probably quality one way or the other. But hopefully the message, if you're saying and you're getting them a fundamental message, then that will be a good thing. But you know, when I first started making videos, you know, the main video that, well, I made really two. Will Russell Brand appear in Lewis prison on the eve of the Battle of Democracy, or it was the signing of the Magna Carta? But that was the first video I made, and I took you on an interesting little journey. And the other video, of course, I made, which was a Martian think tank. And we're going to come back to this image here of this, what I'm of mind is a massive planet being obscured by very clever technology, and we're going to explore all that, and that is what's coming in now. That is the big thing that I've been predicting all this time, and we've seen this before. We've seen this here. This was the shot that came in on the 1st of May that Steve Alston posted back in 2019. It came in 2019 on the 1st of May, I believe. But you know, when we saw it, we just couldn't believe it, because what was it? And kind of the idea being that, you know, I talked a lot about this massive device. If that's, you know, what a planet, a tiny little spot down there, so I believe this is or I'm not too sure what observatory it is now, whether it was Stereo Secchi A or B. I think it was Stereo Secchi A or B, but it was very interesting, because whatever this thing is, it's you know, you kind of like you kind of get a size of it. You know, that little dot in the side there is the size of a planet, and this thing is, you know, back when I first saw it, you know, years ago, 10 years ago or more, you know what I mean? I was just nearly 10 years ago anyway, when we were first seeing it, I was just seeing it as a massive shield, as a massive protection, and whatever these things were catching. And then I saw it for myself on the 26th of August 2015. I was up on the hill with my partner at the time, Dana, and we were just looking out at the she tapped my shoulder. She was on the back of my motorbike, and she tapped my shoulder. I've been up there every morning, every evening, trying to catch a shot of something, and nothing, because, you know, I'm just so close to the, you know, you can get all the best views were coming in at that stage from the southern aspects of the globe, New Zealand and what have you, or going, you know, Alaska and all the sky cams up there, but, you know, not so much where you get the full glaze of the sun. And yet on this day, when this must have been about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you could, maybe a bit later, maybe 5 o'clock, but the sun was still quite high off the horizon, but you could look directly at the sun without squinting at all. It was the most obscure thing. And to the right of the sun, you had this, what you could see like as a sundog, but there was at different times, these, when we first saw it, these spheres were just so crystal clear, these two spheres in the sky, and, you know, you just didn't know whether you know, it was just such a phenomenal spectacle that I took a picture of it. You know, it was a marvel, but these were my first kind of like these were all my first comings into it, and then we're coming back to this, and this shot that has just come in, I believe Brandon Corey Nagley just posted on the 7th of October. Just an incredible shot, and I saw World of Signs also posted this shot, 29th of September. Very similar thing. You can see it as but I'm of a mind there's something there. And this is slightly off center. This thing is, you know, what technology is used to make this thing disappear. But I told you that when we come to this time this year, come to, you know, August, September, October, we're going to come into, but as of last year, it was 61 volcanoes simultaneously going off, and I'm of a mind that by the time we get to mid-October, it's going to be much the same, if not much bigger, except that many of the volcanoes that we're experiencing now are underwater volcanoes. It's tectonic plates under the oceans, creating massive heat under the oceans, sending up massive volumes of moisture, and this in turn, with all the volcanoes going around, there's just plenty of dust, and now plenty of moisture coming up, and wherever this moisture comes up and there's dust available, it's gonna form megastorms. So we're getting this. We're in the period of what was happening right now, isn't it? The big storm that's coming in right now into America. It's you know, it's barely a week after Helene, and you know, I know it's crossing America literally as I make this video now. So, you know, big one. You know, my heart really goes out to you all out there that are dealing with this. But, you know, ultimately we're all in this crazy situation where everything is reaching ahead, not just in this kind of what some would just see as a climatic thing. I would see it as a planetary thing, obviously, with all that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to obviously run through the model in this. But before I take you to the model, I want you to understand that there's 3 weeks until the elections, and something else happens in 3 weeks, and some of you may be paying attention to that as well. And the thing that I'm really watching at the moment is we're going to talk about the Sichuan earthquake as well in 2008, but this is also to do with the Large Hadron Collider and what's happening over the next 4 weeks, and the 4-week physics run for the SPS. I'm not too sure what that is, but North Area users is scheduled to start on 4th of November, followed by the LHC lead iron physics run on the 6th of November, which will last 2.5 weeks. The lead ions physics program is in the, I don't know, these are all, you know, parts of the area where the different sections where different things are loaded into the into the collider. I'm guessing, but you know, this has been a massive journey for the Large Hadron Collider to finally reach this point where they're going to load these lead ions. Now, you know, just to get some proportion of what happens here, you know, it takes a massive amount of time to get these ions, you know, to speed the, you know, very soon they get them up to, when they put something into a Large Hadron Collider, very soon it gets up to 99.9%, 999% of the speed of light, very soon. And then when they start feeding more and more power in, what happens is that the particle starts absorbing more and more energy, and so its mass starts to increase, so they start needing bigger and bigger magnets, because it's got to go somewhere. You know, you can't destroy or create energy. You can only store it for you know, any storage of it is only temporary, and you can slow that process down when you take it to absolute zero, minus 274 degrees Celsius or whatever. This idea that that you can't, the laws of thermodynamics, that you can't create or destroy energy, you can only move it. And so this idea of we're not losing this energy, you know, just because the particles aren't going any faster, something is happening to these particles. They're becoming much, much bigger in mass. Now, this is the first time we've taken a lead ion. Now think of what a lead ion is, as in lead, a single atom of lead, charged. And this is what, you know, when we're talking about uranium, we're talking about a lead. We're talking about lead that has extra protons and neutrons. You know, hydrogen going into helium, it's 2 protons, it's 2 neutrons, and 2 electrons, 2 neutrons, 2 protons coming together to make a hydrogen atom from 1 proton, 1 electron, 1 neutron from a hydrogen atom to a helium atom. You know, the process we see supposedly happening in the sun, where it fuses hydrogen into helium. And in that loss of energy between the transfer, we see that as blazing sunlight, that we're getting out of the single transfer of hydrogen going into helium and somehow compressing into a smaller atom. There's a slight loss of energy, and that blazing sunlight that comes out when these two occupy smaller space and that energy is released, we call that blazing sunshine. Now we understand that when we make heavy water, we're either adding a proton or a neutron to the water to make it heavy water, and that water that can bleed out, and we can use this in kind of like, you hear about, you know, different kind of like fusion devices creating heavy water to kind of like to run these devices to make a sunlight energy and then release just water vapor out of as an exhaust. But here, you know, when we're taking these lead ions for the first time and colliding them at something like, I think, as I'm understanding it, you know, 14 trillion electron volts, we've put way more energy in than it takes to get these particles to travel at 99.99% speed of light. We are going to release a massive amount of energy. You think what happens when we take a lead ion and a lead ion that's now got extra protons and neutrons in it, which is now uranium, or we're going to take it into a centrifuge and put it under super high pressure and force even more protons and neutrons into the mix and create plutonium, whatever levels we want to, kind of how big we want our bang. And that's what, you know, when I made that first video back in which one was it? this one back in a Martian think tank. That was the name of the movie. When it starts out with this image of what looks like a tank that was apparently beamed back from Mars. I think it was Spirit Rover that had shut down, and please excuse my fan humming a little bit here. Here I'm talking about that very event, understanding what's happening with the Large Hadron Collider. Talking about how Valles Marianas on Mars is the scar where all the water drained out from Mars and came to Earth and caused this massive tear. This was my first ever video. Like I say, excuse the hum. The hum will only last a few little bits while I show you some of this, show you this footage and show you where the tear occurred. And it was, like I say, 4,600 kilometers long. It was caused, as I'm understanding, by the big messages that I was getting that enabled me to write Laughing Gas. This was where the tear occurred between Mars and Earth, caused by a Large Hadron Collider, one of these same devices. The wave of magma spewed all the way across the planet and hit up against what we now understand as the Americas and Antarctica there, and burst through there to form what we now call the Sandwich Islands, and the massive sea of magma that pumped through, and the whole expanding of the planet. It's not just the water from Mars, but much, if not all, of its internal magma came flooding out and up along with all its water in this cataclysmic process that made half our planet, if not more, 2/3, two-thirds, if not more, of our whole planet, an oceanic world, where before it was not an oceanic world, but it became much bigger as a result of this whole process. It was the result of a dimensional tear. Now you'll see that this Large Hadron Collider, with this first ever the highest collision speed they've ever created, is at this critical time when this object is going to overtake us. And I've been watching this object. Those who followed my channel have kind of seen me over the years chartering. First of all, it was just the twin tail objects and these crazy sightings of whatever these things flying by, but we started to see the blue and the red objects, more and more and more shots of this fantastic blue thing. We all saw it massively in 2018 in a kind of around about May, June. Everyone was marveling, why is Jupiter so big and blue? And I've been on this massive journey trying to understand, especially this shot here that came in on the when did it come in? Have I still got that shot anywhere? This shot here that came in on the 1st of September 2019, caught by Alex Lujan, caught on webcams to Mexico. It was just a phenomenal shot that gave us this first idea, because we're all talking about right now. Let me just bring this down so I don't lose it. We're all talking about comet. What's the new comet they're going to call it? C-2024 S1 Atlas, or just Atlas. It's the whole timeline for it is ridiculous. But believe it or not, this is. This object coming in is this same object. We've seen it so many times. On my channel, I've explored this one coming in and going out and coming in and going out. But I understand much more about it, about this one now, or Atlas as we're calling it now, because the reason it's so close there right now, and is kind of distant in that shot that's coming in now, just like it was distant, but we saw it on, you saw it from Britain. We saw it on the day my mum died, on the 20th of July 2020, and we were calling it Comet Neowise then. But every year we rename it and we call it something different. But it actually looks like it's coming in towards the sun, as they said. All these comets, at this particular, some of them do, but this particular one doesn't come in and go around the sun. It actually does it looks like it's coming in, but it actually is going around something over here. This thing is orbiting something, and this was absolutely pivotal in me being able to upgrade my astronomical model to be something like it is today. It's because I'm expecting this big blue one that I'm talking about to also come by. I'm not expecting a flyby of this one now, but I'm expecting to see it in the night sky as we've seen it for the last for many years now. Every year, like I say, they rename it. But just coming to my model and just to try and understand this planet here that I'm calling Jupiter, this big blue one, which this model doesn't really do it any justice. It's just for the mechanics of it. But when we saw it in 2018, on May the 4th, 2018, this was kind of when this object was causing May the 4th, 2018, and then every year we go around again. This object had moved slightly further forward and was affecting us at a later stage. And so, but that's what was causing the long duration, in May the 4th, 2018, the killer whale, the long duration volcano but what I'm understanding now about this big blue one and the red one is that this model needs massively updating again. It is in many ways correct, but what I'm not really emphasizing in this, and I haven't been fully understanding, is that this is the big blue one and this is the big red one. And remember how we often see we get these. I'll just come to a big shot of the red and the blue one together that have blown us away in recent years, just to get an idea of what just to hold a kind of a bit of a vision of that in mind. Like we see them there from a distance, this red and the blue one next to each other. This was a shot, a reflection in the glass of a cosmonaut, I believe, on ISS, and they cut the feed directly after. And obviously, this was from the Elon Musk car he sent into space, and you kept seeing this red and this blue thing, and we've had multiple. I'm not sure where that shot was from, but we've got so many shots, and then the big shots of the blue one on its own. We've had countless. We've just had the most fantastic feast of shots. And massive storms and earthquakes and volcanoes, all in exact sequences that we can predict them, just like I can predict the exact sequences of the biggest storms you'll ever see. And can you imagine putting my name on the line and seeing these they're horrible things to see coming in. They tear me apart to see them, because no one wants to see that. But like I say, we can move away from these things if we kind of and maybe we can prevent them if we can raise the overall vibration of our planet. Maybe we can avert so much of this. And I feel that's what a big part of where this story that I'm talking about right now is going, and that is going to be the overall conclusion of this video. This is a vibrational battle, and we're all desperately trying to raise the vibration of this planet to get us through this big transition, and we've all been playing our individual parts in that. And I'm of a mind that this big window of this big transit, this big thing that we're talking about, this big flyby is coming up for imminently, and we've got the whole process of this. Because what happens when we get to this election? Well, let me stay with this and use this as the precursor to understand the election. Because what I'm understanding is it's not really as I've shown in this model, where it's just this big blue object coming straight past us. What's happening is this big object and this big object are orbiting each other. And we knew that this one is orbiting the red one, just like all the other twin tail objects are orbiting this red one. But what's happening is this red one has a massive wobble because of the big blue one. And that big wobble, Earth is, so the big wobble means that our sun and Earth are actually going in between these two. I don't know if that makes any sense. With this swerving wobble that is created when these two spin round, so it's not just one going around the other perfectly. They're in a wobble. They're in a massive wobble. You know, this is looking at them from a massive. This is looking at them from a massive distance. To get but when you're getting super close to these, it seems that this one, when it comes far away from this one, it comes very close and very far. This is at its closest point, I'm of mind, in its rotation, and then it will go into this massive wobble as it trails behind, or as it comes round our sun, and that's causing a wobble for Earth, for our sun as well. These are massive influences that are going on, so they're all occupying a much more internal space. So that it means that, if you like, this big red one is not just sitting in the October position, it's moving up and down. It's moving in between October and right up to December. And that's why I'm of a mind that sometimes we get views like, remember the shot in, sorry, that's not the right one, this one here. Like, this was a clear flyby of the of either both of the twin tails at separate points, or one of the same twin tails. But if we go back to 2017, to that, not that shot, but this shot, the shot that Neil Martin, one of his last posts, where he showed this object, this is of our mind that's why we're seeing that in the December-January point, because we're getting an idea of the whole wobble. That's why we get these incredible shots of this big red object from time to time, and this big red object sits diametrically opposed, if you like, as they spin around because of their wobble, to the blue one. So they kind of share the same orbital relationship, which means that this innermost, as we understand it, this innermost twin tail periodically gets closer to us, because this is orbiting this big red one that is on this wobble, that is periodically getting closer. And so we get this popping into view, but this is you know, and you know, this is what we're you know, this big blue one, you know, that when I, you know, go back to, you know, where we've seen those kind of, where we'll go forward to 2020, where we saw that shot from Nick Thomas on the 9th of July, where we saw an object, an eclipse. This would corroborate with that, and it's big enough to, you know, and again, that shot there, posted in November 2022. You know, these are not little tiny comets. These are massive objects, and you know, I'm of a mind that, you know, because when you understand that these times are massive times, because this is where great intelligence comes back to this planet, and this flyby, as I'm understanding it, causes of this, whether you want to call it Jupiter or whatever, causes a massive electromagnetic burst, and it's going to shut down so many systems on this planet when it goes by. And this is the big concern, because a big part of the control mechanism, as as of who we are, is going to be affected by this, of our identity of I, if you like. This, you know, it's technology that has transmitted the ego into the human state and taken us from a path of where we once were, and has basically, you know, we're being invaded, if you like, by a narrative and by a story that's being piped into us in ways, in using technology we can't understand. That's why this process has to happen, and that's why they want to fire up their Large Hadron Collider before we actually wake up, because they know after this point humanity awakes. And so what's happening with the Large Hadron Collider? Well, you've got to go back to Mars, and you've got to go back to Mars and see the point where this Large Hadron Collider collided. This Large Hadron Collider went bang and caused this massive fault line where you can see all the water drain through. You know, Mars is covered in zircon, and they were looking for a place to go. You know, they could have looked at it in the Goldilocks, whatever region of space or whatever we kind of, but they might have looked at a planet close to the sun and thought, that planet looks good. Why don't we just go there? And they would have been looking to transport their oceans, and what a way to transport their oceans, to make a hole between a dimensional hole that takes their oceans through to Earth. And you can imagine that when their story comes to an end on planet Earth and they're thinking about migrating because they want a place of their own, where would they be going? Would they be thinking about going back to cold Mars? Or would they be thinking about going somewhere else? Would they have another planet in mind to go to? And what would be, if we could understand what happened on Mars, what caused this massive great tear to occur? You know, like I say, zircon only forms under an ocean. And, you know, it is the process of fundamentally carbonic acid breaking apart the seabed. And as it breaks apart the seabed, because each molecule of carbonated water, CO2 and H2O, remember when they come together, each molecule has 3 atoms of oxygen. Not one, not like water, one. It's got the 2 oxygen from the carbon dioxide as well. So you end up with carbonated water. And that's got 3 atoms of oxygen. 2 of those molecules can get either side of a calcium ion and pull calcium out of bedrock and turn it into calcium bicarbonate, feed it into the water, so it can become part of the food chain now. It can become bone and teeth and skeletal mass. And now we've dissolved the bedrock. Now all the rock is now, or the kingpin that held it together can dissolve, and all of those aspects of the rock, all the elements, all the minerals are now unlocked. All the salt, the potassium, everything, all the metals, all held within that rock, can now dissolve into the water and become part of the table of life, enable life to occur. Because the nutrients are there, the building blocks for life are there, because the carbon dioxide added into the water and create the carbonic acid. That dissolving bedrock filtered through the rock of the dissolving bed under the ocean, filters that, and you get the finest silicates, and they're going through the water's getting closer and closer to the hot mantle below, and so it starts heating up. The water then separates into hydrogen and oxygen, but the massive pressure, it can't explode and create a volcano and turn back into water and allow this kind of volcanic explosion that we see when a volcano opens on or above water level, and water can access that and feed and then explode, separate into hydrogen and oxygen and react in a massive explosion. That can't happen. So the next thing to oxidize on the on the periodic table is going to be the carbons and the silicons. And so silicon gets oxidized, and that's crystalline formation, and that's what we see covering Mars, which means it's not just had the Noachian period that we call it, because we know it had water. It was once oceanic. This oceanic period is marked not just by kind of like marks of sedimentation, which means that there's been water there. It's got zircon, which means there's been a carbon process, a massive carbon process going on, and that is the fingerprint of life, and we call that the Noachian period. And we can see all the water disappeared from the Noachian time, and it seems that they came here and their massive ark, their massive ship, once they bought their water, and they needed to control their water, they needed tide, so they created a massive ship, what we call the moon. And they came here and they've controlled this planet. And now we see the same thing going on again, the same process that has been encoded into humanity through religion, the gathering of gold, and this massive great event that we're feeding into, that all the religions have been fed into. Now, why do you think they want to make the Large Hadron Collider go off? Why did I write my book? Why did I tell all these stories back in from 2011 to, you know, especially the Martian ones? I can remember back into like when I released Laughing Gas, you know, and I was talking and I was making all my videos about Mars. I was doing the Gorilla Bar with a bunch of friends, and one of my friends, Leon, he said, "Dave, you got to shut up about Mars." And I said to him, "Listen, dude, I love you so much, but I'm sorry, I'm just the wrong man to say that to." And I said, I you know, I've got to do what I've got to do, and you've got to do what you've got to do. But shutting up about Mars is about the last thing on my. Anyway, we had the best party ever. It was one of the best parties that we'd ever been involved with. The Gorilla Bar just went to a whole new high. And Leon came up to me at the end of it, and he said, "Oh, I just got one word for you." He said, "Mars. You know, people love it. You're crazy, but you're a good crazy." And it's provoking. It's making people think outside the box. It's opening people up to fantastic ideas, and it's compelling. And so it was good. But of course, when it went into Planet X and it was like a date on doom, it was just, you can imagine. So when that event came in, that really put me on the map, and it was putting a date on this. It was, you know, it was kind of political suicide as well to see this whole thing, and start start trying to, you know, understand its movements and understand the big situation, and the wobble that I'm bringing now between this red one and Jupiter is going to be an interesting new model to begin, because this is going to be a challenge to incorporate that into a new model, because to understand this, because you know I really want you to understand that I'm understanding that this is, you know, this has always been not about Jupiter, not about this object, not about Earth, not about Mars, but about where the agenda that drives the chaos that is tearing this world apart, their big agenda, what they want. They want their own world. They want, you know, and it could be that Venus has been set up for that. You know, Venus, as Velikovsky said in Worlds in Collision, he said that Venus is a new arrival, and when certainly when Mariner 2 went to Venus, it was he'd predicted that it would lose signal as it went through the tail, because he said it was brand new, that it wasn't even in some of the old star charts, you know, the old Egyptian star charts, that it was that new. A bit like the moon, you know, the tales of the Colburn Bible saying that the moon came after the second great destruction, and it also describes this massive dragon that comes and circles the world about, and it says that, you know, that whatever it calls it, you know, whatever the Colburn calls the great dragon, it says that the dragon doesn't come to punish us for our mistakes. It punishes us for the mistakes we fail to rectify. In other words, it balances the equations that we can't balance. It balances the equation. And it said that also that when they came down from their mountain tops, from their hiding places, they had no memory of who they were, and their guides and gods were gone. They were just babbling fools with no memory of, of who they are, their names, anything. They were just babbling fools. It became the age of the wise man and the fool. Again, they just forgot everything about themselves, just gone in the blink of an eye. And so we have these kind of like ideas of these big resets when these things come by, and these big events where we can potentially be kind of like we can lose our connection to our gods, but there seems to be other times when we can make our connection to the gods. And to me, this time, this whole story is when I saw myself, that made me write laughing gas, being destroyed by a tsunami, and then I was killed in this tsunami, in this vision I had years ago, back in 2006. I was killed by a tsunami in a moment, and then in the death process, I was just too part of all the wretchedness that had caused the problem. I was too affiliated with the problems. I had no foot in any real solution to it. Maybe I had intentions, but there was nothing rooted into it, and I died, and I was pulled down, and I was part of the karmic cleansing. I was sucked down, and the tragic loss of losing everything that I'd created, everything that I was part of, that I couldn't be with that anymore because my vibration was too low for it. And being pulled out was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. Even, nothing was more painful for that, and it took me years to overcome it. And I went out to South America, and I drank ayahuasca, and I went out with this intention of finding out what had happened and why I was carrying this immense sadness. And I'm of a mind that this is the massive change of that timeline, that we're all living out to change that timeline, that I've had the opportunity, that maybe this timeline has been played out 1,000 times before, and it can be because this was where originally humanity ended. And whatever happened, and maybe this was the birth of Venus, and maybe the waters were transferred to Venus to repeat what's happened between Mars and Earth, and this was the continuation of this story, and whatever's left on Earth after this, Earth would carry on, and there'd be a lot less water on this planet, and the device could be detonated. I mean, this is, you're understanding that they've poured an enormous amount of energy into these lead ions now. They're not just like normal lead. They've had a long time to pour a massive amount of energy over a very long time into these protons to release all of that energy almost the same time as when this whole thing, by the looks of it, all the money's been funded now to Israel. They've got all the weapons to kind of do the deed and be the sacrificial lamb in this. And same with the same with Zelensky. He's got no other option now to fight. America goes out of the run. Who wins here? Who comes into the election? Think about the interim period. If Trump wins, then you've got an interim period where the Israelis know that Trump will back anything they want to do. Though Biden might not back it, he's a kind of sitting duck president, and the Israelis can unleash all out hell. And technically, it's not even America doing it. So America create this kind of fireball. But if Biden manages to stay in, that would cause an absolute coup in America, because America would be blaming Biden for what the Israelis are doing. The Republicans would be a civil war if Biden stays in power, or Kamala stays in power. It could likely be a total all-out civil war. The kind of reaction that the Republicans have, because they truly believe that Trump wants to stop it, even though he's there just saying the most unbelievably ridiculous things, like Israel should bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. He said it like 3 times. I saw it on secular talk. I quite like his videos sometimes. I mean, I think he's way too kind of like pro the Republicans sometimes, but he's took some pretty brave stuff. Sorry, I think he's too pro the Democrats sometimes. I don't mean to give him a hard time there, because I'm also a massive admirer for how he speaks out. And if he looked at my stuff, you know, for most people, they just look at all this stuff and they just think it's utterly insane. None of us can really look at the truth of what's happening here. It's just too big. We live in these little sub stories, depending on how far we've moved through our belief walls. And that's what this is all about, is when you go into a singularity, one or the other of your controlling aspects has to be leaving. This is all about belief. That's what this grand bottleneck is all about, is which soul each one of us finally chooses in this massive race. And this massive terrified agenda are desperate to get out before the massive awakening happens, because now we are now neck and neck with our invaders' technology. For the first time, humanity now understands every aspect. You know, you can understand through a million different sci-fi movies and books and everything else like that. You can conceive utterly what I'm talking about with the Large Hadron Collider, understanding that it is lead ions that are used in a nuclear bomb reaction. Yeah, they're kind of like they're denser with more dense, but they've not jumped up. If you can jump up to the next level of stability, you know, it's like I see atoms as geometric stable structures, and when they reach a geometric stable structure, they're set like that, and they'll stay like that forever, if you like, unless someone detonates a device that can make them go into a chain reaction where they all release all of their energy simultaneously, a reaction that you would hope burn out. But imagine a reaction that is so powerful that it doesn't just make the atoms release all their energy, it splits and destroys and tears the actual the fabric that we can never touch or understand, what we're truly made of, what really makes all atoms and all matter. The matrix itself is a tear in that. It's a dimensional tear that is being created. This is a chain reaction. We know that we can create chain reactions when we release enough energy. We know that. We've done that on a small scale. This is taking a single one of those and just ramming infinite amounts of energy into this space beyond anything we can comprehend. This is like a massive meteorite now in these tubes, as they're so massive now because of all the energy. Their mass is far greater than you can ever believe now. They're bigger than massive boulders, and when this collision happens, this is happening at twice the speed of light, because the combined speed of each of these objects is traveling effectively at the speed of light, 99.999% of the speed of light, which means that this is going to rupture the fabric of that. And for me, this is when a world commits suicide. This is a world when it commits suicide. Our cells do the same thing. You know, when I studied anatomy and physiology and I looked at kind of cell biology, I learned about the sympathetic pathway. And, you know, we understand it in so much more complex ways, even from when I studied it 20 years ago. But, you know, the complex pathways of the body goes through first, you know, inflammation, and then releasing different types of kind of like defense, white blood cells, and all the rest of it. And its final pathway, you know, as I'm understanding it, is what was called MAC. You know, the last in the sympathetic pathway, which was MAC, membrane attack complex, where we attack the cell wall and destroy the whole cell, and all the intracellular activity is suddenly blown out, and there is no cell anymore, and it's all just floating debris, extracellular floating debris. It's all just turned inside out and obliterated. And that to me is what the Large Hadron Collider is. That is why it has to be detonated at this key point, at this key time. Europe is the actual point. Europe is where the religious karma is being applied. That's where the big showdown of the war is intended to happen. In Europe, to bring all of Europe into a state of absolute all-out war against Russia, and then feed that process and ignite that Large Hadron Collider. Karma. One is the karma is the the gods. We have to do this process of our own karmic demise ourselves, because it's too brainful to look in from the outside. But this is our time, and we are the controllers of this. We have to find responsibility. Great knowledge and great wisdom comes with great responsibility. That was what was shown to me when I was showing this big process of this going off, and I heard this massive concerto, but it was a choir of what sounded like birdsong. And then I was shot out of my body, and I saw the whole planet, and I could see where the dawn light was hitting on the planet, and I could hear all the birds singing in this dawn light. And it was a concerto of the most epic. It was just like a crazy trance party, a crescendo point, your favourite, most fantastic trance party. Absolutely going absolutely crazy. And then I hear the words. I can see the dawn light hitting the planet, and I hear the words, "Here marks the beginning of an age, here marks the end of an age. Great knowledge and great wisdom comes with great responsibility." And then the sun came over the horizon, and I just felt that, the power of that. And that is where we are now. We're at humanity's awakening point, but we're also at the point of absolute, where the opposition, that which has used our planet and for its big transition, and however big this story goes, we're at that crux point now. And I've in mind that we're all here to play our part, and one of two things happens here. Either we as a soul group, this is our time for most of us to leave this planet now, and we're all going off to somewhere new, to start something new, and Earth has this massive cataclysm. The hole is open, 2 planets are created from one, and Venus becomes an inhabitable planet. The gold is obviously transported from here to Venus, ready for the big transition for it. So it's got an atmosphere that it can fend off being that much closer to the sun, until the sun cools down enough that it doesn't need that, but it will need some protection. And that's why I'm of mind this big agenda has been gathering this gold for this big transition, for this big journey, for this big jump to Venus. Why people think we're going to Mars? That's the wrong way. It's like the story of the Poseidon, where the vicars are telling them they've got to go to the top deck, even though the ship's upside down and the top deck's done. It's just like, no, we've got to go to the hull. And they're like, we go to the hull, we can't get out. And it's just like, yeah, but the hull's kind of the way out. But, you can knock on the door. You might know how to open a hole in the hull. But that's the right way up. And you might know how to open it, but at least you can knock, humbly knock on the door, on the hull, and hopefully someone above will open a hole and let you out if they found you and everything's gone to plan. And we're kind of in that situation now, where everything's been put in its place for this massive agenda, and it all relies on absolute war to make the cataclysm happen, because it won't be allowed to happen if humanity's vibration. And my message in this, when I was shown Planet X in a vision, and I'd see myself, like I say, running down behind where I keep my truck and caravan, and just up here, and I was being chased by the army, and my friend jumps out, and I said, "Why are you chasing me?" I said, why are they chasing me? Why? And I didn't say, why is the army chasing me? I said, where's the sun gone? Because it was pitch black. I didn't say, why have they been chasing me? And he said, because of that. And again, I had one of these experiences where I shot out of my body from this place, and I looked down, I could see the earth, but I couldn't see any light hitting the earth. I turned around, and there was this object flying towards me. It came past me, and I heard the words, "This is what the fuss is all about." And that's what we're happening. This is the big flyby that we're having, in my opinion, right now. This is what they're all scared about. But I'm of a mind that all of these visions I've had are either how this thing all played out once upon a time, and how potentially different beings have been coming to Earth and re-experiencing our timeline. I am experiencing this timeline as it was being lived already and had happened. It's all happened. And we experience and come into this timeline and change this timeline. And I am one of many who's come through this timeline. Or that's happened, and I have been given the opportunity to come back and try and save this timeline, as we all have, not just me, all of us. Our kind of our guides, if you like, are ourselves, helping our past from a higher place. It's ourselves reaching back to ourselves. From another time. And I've seen, Interstellar explored this idea. I'm not the first to explore that as an idea. We've played with all of these ideas. It's difficult to understand, but I'm also of a mind that the big eclipse that I saw has already happened, and technology has been used so that event never has to happen that I saw, because I'm of a mind that event, if it had already happened, but there was technology that was being used. And when I talk about technology, in some of the early videos, as in some of the earlier videos, I explored that kind of like that same device that I showed you, whatever that is, that were caught by stereosexuality A and B. Excuse my fans going; they'll only be going for a little bit. I probably won't play any more of this to try and calm them down a little bit. But trying to understand what this device was, whether this was actually a device like that, or is it a combination of things, or is it what screens off this big blue planet when it gets so close to our sun? Is there technology that would enable this big blue planet? I mean, I don't think life exists on this big blue planet as I'm experiencing from my kind of the visions that I've had, and I've had a lot going there. I know it sounds crazy, but it's I understand it is the home of the fifth dimension, and matter there operates in a completely different way. It's a much more energetic realm, and we're a realm made of matter. So it's kind of like everything's operating a little bit differently in that realm. But what is that device? Is it that there's a device up there, or is it something like, I don't know if you remember hearing about David Hudson. He was, as I understand, he was a gold prospector, and he got my curiosity years ago, talking about monoatomic gold, and he'd basically, his part of his kind of like his process of searching for gold is taking soil samples, and he took these soil samples and he put them into a spectrometer, and he burnt everything off, and then at the end, in his what do they burn it off? Not a cauldron, whatever they call it, Anyway, the name will come. You know what I mean, though, where they burn things off at super high temperatures. When everything was burnt off, it cooled back down. When it cooled back down again, this weight came back on the scales, and this white powder at the bottom. And when he heated the white powder up, it disappeared. And he believed it was monoatomic gold, which some called orma or ormus. And it's kind of like, in effect, I guess it's the ultimate salt, you know. And it's you know, it spins at a very high frequency because it's single atoms of gold, and when it's energized, it's such a high frequency that it disappears, and it seems to make everything around it disappear. And imagine being able to suspend that in your atmosphere and ionize it. Particles that are electromagnetically held, or however held, in space and ionized into such a way that they can be, number one, controlled by a field, and number two, excited by a field, to make a whole world just disappear, to create a cloaking system. And that's what on my mind we're seeing with all of these systems. Cloaking systems, very advanced cloaking systems, using what I'm understanding he discovered when he did all his research on monoatomic gold. And I think that's why, you know, a big part of why we gather gold is its use for hiding stuff. That loads and loads of stuff is concealed from us using gold, because of its unbelievable properties. When it's, you know, it's already got amazing conductive qualities on its own, just in its most pure, natural, kind of like non-messed around with state. And yet we're understanding now that its qualities are unbelievable when it's single atoms, monoatomically charged atoms. Like I say, it's the ultimate cloaking system, the ultimate way of hiding all sorts of wonderful things. So that's basically where we're at the moment. We just don't know what's going to happen in this next election. We can see that this thing is right where I'm expecting it to be. It's absolutely massive. You've got all the storms accompanying it. It's spectacular beyond all comprehension. It's utterly unbelievable, as is most of the Planet X story, as is pretty much everything that's happening in our world right now. It's all so unbelievable that most of us are in a state of just like, but we're 3 weeks away from a very big event here, and they're going to try and do everything they can to trigger us with everything that they can to trigger us through this process and kickstart this whole process. And it could be that we could have another flyby, that because this is so much closer to the internal core than I've ever realized, that this could be another year. But mathematically, I really struggle to you know, when to bring the blue and the red one into this dynamic and give this and create this wobble as we're seeing it, to account for everything that we've seen. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be a journey. But I will say that after this event, after whatever happens over these next weeks, I'd like to rebuild this model with as much assistance as I can get. And instead of starting the next video with doing this, instead of having a Martian think tank, I want to have a Planet X think tank, and talk about and get involved with people who might be able to help me with using AI to take this further, and how AI to now, because I guess it's all going to be about asking the questions and the prompts to drive the engine to you know, how to put all these variables in to a model. Maybe it might be easier than I thought, might be much harder. It would be so interesting to work with people that might be interested into taking this to the next level and making this fantastical, and using that same apparatus to look at all the different times and to capture and to capture with AI. You know, I keep seeing all these videos coming up showing these kind of like these futuristic kind of like realities created by AI, and they're all fantastic. We've got the opportunity now to open up a new think tank and use this think tank to help us kind of tailor this, because this is getting very complex for me to build now. And so we're ready for the next phase now. So that I'm open to that, and I'm kind of putting out for that as well. And for all those who've helped me on my Patreon, I'm sorry I've not been able to kind of do much on Patreon or anything just of late. If I'm honest with you, I've not believed any of it has been going down. We're kind of at that point now where I just don't know what to do anymore. It's kind of, you know, my own story is, as I say, it's so bizarre that that I'm kind of, it's kind of, I know my own story is just, it's just looking at this is, all of this is just too fantastical for us to get our heads around. But so many of us have no idea of the interference that we're actually fighting with to do what we wish to do. You know, what is, if you like, our ego aspects, and they've been given enormous power because we were linking to our higher selves back in, you know, 10 years ago, when we were having the real height, when many of us were making our transitions to the fifth element, ready to take these beings that we are now, all that they are, to the fifth, and preparing those who, because, you know, whether you're choosing to become your ego self doesn't make you wrong, doesn't make you evil. That's just that this human in this time is choosing to tally with the ego. That's not, you're still in service to something, whether you go with your higher self or your fifth dimensional self or your fourth dimensional self. Both are divine beings, both are on a divine pathway, both, it seems, are coming in now, one or the other. We can't be a duality anymore, which is why I wrote Laughing Gas, my first big message. I just want to understand what the bleep is going on. You know, bored down, my glass is empty, all my original ideas, everything I ever thought. You know, I've been an environmental activist, a kind of like campaigner, you know, I've done it all, and yet suddenly I realise everything I'm going on about is a total crock of shite. I just want to understand what's going on. Can you give me some window on what the hell is going down? Because everything, I am completely out. My glass is empty. What the fuck is going on? And the answer I got was, put simply, your earth will no longer support duality. You know, you're not choosing a side, you're choosing a soul, and that's what all this is boiling down to. And there's different agendas who want different things, and one agenda wants their own world and for themselves. And all that's unfolding now could be the solution to that. It really could be. Maybe that's going to happen now, maybe that's not going to happen till another time, but everything's been put in place now for the biggest bomb to go off. And, you know, we're all kind of got a million different stories and thrown in a million different places. And, you know, there's a million different stories that you're all being pulled into here. And to see which one serves you best is, well, it's the most peaceful path. That's our only way through this now, is peace. You can't fight your way out of this. And Iran knows this, and they're being forced into a place where they've got to go into a state of war or they just get annihilated. Can you see the kind of catch-22 situation? It's a and so, you know, we come back. The reason I've covered this, and obviously this is not going to be as near to us, but it's going to be a spectacle, of course, and of course, you know, according to NASA, the next new moon. Oh, sorry. You know, that I was just looking up of this. So there it was. Mini moon to orbit Earth in 2 months. Earth's about to get a second moon for a couple of months, but it won't be visible for most people. So, you know, that is, if this thing flies by us, I mean, that can be two things. That can be, obviously, this object is still going to swing by. It's not going to be, you know, we saw this object massive in 2020 also. Do you remember 2020 in October 2020? It was just filled up the whole sky. That that is this same object. You know, we've just watched it coming around and about, but it's not going to be as close to us this time, I don't think. I might be very wrong. It's heading down to the light. We know it doesn't go around our sun. They're telling us it's going to come in and go around our sun, but like I say, it doesn't. I know that to be true, even though, you know, and then what they'll say is when it doesn't go past our sun, then they'll tell us there's no, the old story, oh, it broke up, like it didn't come out the other side. Oh, it broke up. Because we know now, as it heads into the light, very soon it's going to be in the daylight sky. So we know it's going to come into the daylight sky. So we could assume that that's going to be the fabled moon that we're that is going to be coming in. But obviously, when this object flies in and goes out the other side, we're going to, and it drops its crazy protection, whatever that stuff that it's using. Remember the shot in Mr. MBB 333 posted on the 2nd of June 2023, just an incredible shot of a massive blue object. When it comes out of when it passes Earth, it will then be visible like this again. You know, I'm imagining it's going to be a very, very close flyby, this one. They're terrified by this. All the powers that be that control us through whatever technology, their technology is going to get fried through this. Each and every human being is going to experience themselves being just who they truly are. Unless, of course, they've chosen to be their ego aspect, then their ego can be in the heart of the, you know, you understand also, as far-fetched as it might sound, when we come back to 2016 and that big event that happened on the 14th of October 2016, that was flying by Mars, and that was the transportation of the souls that still exist on Mars even after their big transit. You see, they've been hacking. For me, my ego was from Mars. And I was able to see my ego in my process, where I locked myself away in the mountains and I did my big process, and I had to learn how to channel, I had to learn my different influences. And I was given the opportunity of seeing my ego, and I was asked if I wanted to see my ego, and my ego was on Mars. And this was before this event happened. My ego left Mars back in at this time, during this event, and is now in a process where it is in migration, if you like. It is finally being moved from Mars, from where it last incarnated, and its massive journey of existing as a fourth dimensional hack in humanity, you know, transmitted by technology via Saturn. And it has been in a prison of hate for thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of years, potentially tens of thousands of years. We just don't know what the exact storyline is, or how long ago it was that Mars got destroyed, and how long those souls have been trapped there. Those who haven't been brought out of that suffering loop already. You know, there's been many that have been transited. So understand that these souls aren't evil. These souls are, if you like, fallen angels of a bygone era that are piped into Earth via technology, and we see them as many of us say we can't live without our ego. And, you know, honestly, if that's for you and that's your truth and that's your absolute truth, and you can't live without that noise, that subversion, and that you consider yourself more that subversion than who you truly are, you know, each and every human being will choose. This is a human choice. This is not the soul's choice. This is each individual human's choice. This planet allows, because of the intellectuals, the massive intellectual kind of minds that are beyond the soul groups that really control this earth, and the massive wars that would otherwise ensue, humanity is given the power to choose its own, the souls and the gods on which it incarnate within it. It has to do that because it's in the middle of a very complicated, much bigger, much bigger story. And So you're in this situation where this event happened, even though, you know, we might never talk about it and it's too much to believe. That was caught on a webcam. It was it fits into the models and the movements of everything else. We can understand that it really is Jupiter. We just live in a heliocentric model that is 500-year-old model that just doesn't actually make any sense. And we can't really explain the kind of like what's causing, like many people are saying it's all HARP that's causing, and it's all kind of weather modification that's creating these crazy storms. And I would say to you, yeah, I could see how you could say that, and I could see how you can manipulate a storm. But if there's no moisture in the air, you can't make it rain. And this is the big thing, is that there's just a massive volume of moisture that's going into the air, and it's been increasing exponentially year by year since 2017. Since these times when all these big objects came onto our night sky, came onto our ecliptic, and started coming into our night sky for a change, instead of just being hiding in bright daylight, they were slipping into that shadow aspect of the Earth, and we were seeing them for the first time. So this is a massive time. This is when it's all to play for. This is when it's all going down. This is all of us doing our different types of work to facilitate this massive change. And what was my first message in all of this, before I left home, my first message was I was being chased by these indigenous. I understood them because I went to visit the Arawaku and the Kogi many years ago when I was in my 20s, and up in Colombia in the Lost City. And I got there, and after that I heard, and they started coming to me in visions, and but they'd come to me before I'd went there, just before I left home, when I was 17, and I was being chased by this tunnel, and they came up behind me, and I couldn't get out of this tunnel fast enough, and I could see a light opening in this big earthy sort of underground tunnel, and I crawled faster, but I was being chased. I was someone behind me. I felt like I was in pursuit, and I saw this opening, and I could see all these other tunnels coming in and off, and various different junctures as I was going down, and I was just kind of going forward because I could see a kind of opening up ahead, and I could see light coming down, and there were other entrances coming into this same place, and I was crawling faster, but this person was coming up behind me, and then I felt them rear off down the tunnel just behind, and then I saw down another tunnel up to my right. Yeah, I saw them just cut across, and I realized that they were trying to get up ahead of me to the same kind of juncture, but they were kind of going round to come to the same opening, and I was trying to get faster to try and get out, to try and get away before and then just suddenly I get to the opening, and they get to the opening at the same time. I can't see it up, I can just see the light coming down, and they're directly there in my face. And he's got a knife in his hand, and he throws his knife at me, and he's like proper indigenous, kind of like proper deep kind of Amazonian jungle face, and he throws the dagger at me, and I block it with my hand, and as I look, it's landed in my hand, and I throw it down on the ground. He picks it up again, and he throws it at me, and I block it, but this time it lands in my hand again, and I turn around and I look at it, and I see that it's got this stone in the handle of a colour I've never ever seen. And as I look at the stone, I look at the handle, I look at him, I wake up in my bed, in my little home in Saltdean in near Brighton, in the southeast of England. I look up, and I wake up, and I just hear the words, "Cut away, cut away," and I understand what that means now, is that what I saw dragging me down in my vision that made me write laughing gas was the guilt and the pain that I hadn't been able to change things. And that all of this has been a big opportunity for me to come into awareness about what's really happening. And see the bigger picture, and have a chance to bring myself out of it. You realize I've done everything in my power to try and bring awareness to this big thing that's happening, and this big process that we're going through, and this massive flyby that's about to happen, and whatever goes on through this big flyby, maybe it's going to be a wave, maybe it's going to be a tsunami. You know, I said I was going to take you back to just talking about the storms that are happening here, and just this seismology here, because, you know, remember, you look at the fault lines happening around here, you know, the north of South America, and the kind of like and you can see this massive fault line that runs down here. You know, this is, you know, where I talk about in 1939. If I come back to 1939, and it's oh, sorry, we're going yeah, to here. That's 1939. So this is where Carlos Ferrada is predicting that a massive planet this massive blue planet, the same one that's about to do a crossing now, will cross on the 20th of January 1939, and he gets it exactly right. It's 4 days out, basically. It happened on the full of the new moon, and the earthquake occurred, and so many people died. And then we have to go. I saw just recently, because I saw GeoHub, who's an incredible. Where is he? GeoHub, Geology Hub, sorry, GeoHub, Geology Hub. Sorry. He's really well informed. Fantastic research. He's a proper volcanist. He's really looking at the information, understanding a lot of the plates. Obviously, he doesn't bring planets into his big narration, but nonetheless, he did recently just post this about talking about the eruption that no one ever talked about, that never reached the news. The eruption from 1942, because I often talk about the 1944 eruption of Vesuvius, which was in March, expectedly, because of the twins, the same twins that caused, you know, the 11th of March 2011, the same twins that I've charted, you know, the previous kind of 2 years. I'd said before you were going to see coming in massive at those 2 years, and sure enough, they came in exactly as I said, just like all of these flybys. Because this thing, we've got so much data now that I've been watching it so many years and bringing all this together, that I've brought thousands of years of research together using these what I call orreries, these astronomical digital orreries, which is the systems I'm showing you here. But you know, we can put the same thing happening now, happening to us over the last years. But you can see how in like I say, 1939. Sorry. Oh no, wrong. We were right there, but this one's got the overlays. 1939 was that point where Jupiter has just crossed, and then we're going to go around 1 year. Jupiter's coming in, and noticing it's now further forward, and we're running parallel with it. And then we're going to come around another year, and we're getting the same thing. It's between us and then we come around to 1942, and where is it? And there it is, directly between us at that point where that volcano occurs. Now we had the same thing in, say, where it comes between us, and we have that kind of like, if we come to 2004, where we get the big tsunami. That's the same flyby that happens in 2000, right at the end of 2003, 2004. Jupiter comes and crosses, and we get a massive. Oh no, it's the end of 2004. It was Boxing Day 2004, wasn't it? Right at the end of 2004. And we get the same Jupiter crossing at that point, and then we keep going round 2004, and we come to 2008, and that's where we get the Sichuan earthquake, the massive Sichuan earthquake that, in my mind, comes directly between Earth and the comes between Earth and the sun. And at that point, and then you know, so when we're seeing that shot in 2019, 2000, you know, we are seeing the same thing, except that right there, it's right on the ecliptic. It's basically it's the same thing. It's the fundamental crossing point. We've got anyway. I think that's kind of where we're at right now. That's the big event. Whether that is going to happen, whether we've all been here to change that timeline and find a way to stop this event happening, this big event, and see what the Large Hadron Collider is, and take our nuclear fission to a whole new level with World War III. Because as you know, this is America trying to make it look as if they haven't done anything, and they're going into an election period. If Trump wins now, it's almost certain that Trump will win because they've timed it, because the way they've timed it. But if Trump didn't win, then you could see it as that would be an interesting. This, you know, no one knows how this is all going to play out now. This is uncharted time. This whole thing has been to give humanity the opportunity of a whole new timeline, a very uncharted timeline, because it hasn't happened yet. It's never been achieved yet. This whole plan has to try and change this whole narrative to some other outcome than what it's looking like at the moment. You're all going to do whatever you've got to do over the next weeks as this time comes in. Your biggest thing to deal with is where you're really at right now, and being in peace and following your heart in this massive journey right now, because no regrets. You know, I've done everything I can to try and make this happen, and I've carried as much weight, and it's felt so difficult to do this. And like I say, all those who supported me in this, even though I've not been able to kind of help you that much, I've not been that very good, I've not been shit really, to be honest with you, over the last 2 years. I've been a shadow of myself, and a part of me is just realizing that my message is so intensely over the top now. Like, what do you do with any of it? You know, what do you do with all this data? What do you do with all these earthquakes, these volcanoes? You know, those who can't process this information, those that don't make efforts to connect with their gods, or haven't had the opportunity to connect with their gods, you know, and connect with their highest aspects. Just all you've got to do is just ask for help from the highest place. Really try to find that divine place. You know, when I read as much as I could of Laughing Gas, and I will write more after this, because it could be going on. We've got another year of this, and we will soon find out. I don't think we have. I think, but you know, as Laughing Gas, I managed to read as much as to get you into the Amazon, and then beyond that, it gets really intense for me beyond that point. But I've tried to make the book available on all of that. I've tried to read you up to that point. I will read further into that, and I'm also up for finding someone who might be up for kind of like helping me do that as an audio book, because I'm emotionally struggling to actually do that. I read so badly anyway, and I don't think I do it justice. And it's oh my goodness me, it's an emotional roller coaster. But I've got a funny feeling that book will make a lot more sense after all of this, when we're on the other side, and those of you make it through and bring your highest aspects into this new age. If you're invited in, and what brought you into this age was birth, and you were born into this earth, and you were invited into this earth. This is a new age, and you may or may not be invited. I have no dealings on whether you will or won't be invited into this new age. This so begins a new age. A whole new karmic realm exists after this. The slate is always balanced at the end. This is the balancer. This is the slate balancer. And understand that when I was given my message and I was shown this, I said, tell me it misses. And remember, this is so important. The answer I was given was, yes, it misses. It is not human karma. It is deemed you are not a race of war, but you are a race subverted with war. And that will now change. It is understood that humanity is not this demonic frequency that we are being narrated through the media, that we want these monstrous genocides, that we want all this depleted uranium to be buried, to be for Lebanon now and Iraq and Afghanistan and Ukraine to be covered with depleted uranium bombshells and their liberation, which they've got to spend the next umpteen, decades, if not millennia, if not, centuries, paying off these massive debts that will be incurred by these massive wars for their liberation at such wicked costs. You've got to kind of come out of that and realize that, this massive journey has been an opportunity to raise your vibration and get ready for the next phase. And if you can bring your highest aspect into this new age, into this new cycle, it will be it's going to be the age of the wise man and the fool again. If the ego enters at this time, it's going to be a crazy time. It's going to be a lot of people that are going to forget who they were, and there's a lot of people that are going to come out of the story of who they thought they were. That story is not going to be them anymore. They're not going to have to carry the burden of all the doubt that they've had to carry, and they can go through. But then there's going to be a whole different means of motivation on this planet, and a whole different thing, a whole different. The challenges on this planet are going to change massively as humanity moves out of duality and back into singularity. One soul, one human, no backseat drivers. Everything is going to be put in place to try and recreate the astral realms that will be destroyed by this, the earth astral realms, the low vibrational earth astral realms that have lived off earth. That's where Martian invaders have really lived. They're piped into the human experience, but the human experience has been also piped into the earth astral realms, which is how our invaders have built their realms off the back of our realms. And so there's the story of Earth is not nearly as like the tip of the iceberg of a much, much, much bigger galactic story. And many of you can perceive it and see it in, many of you got a much better understanding of it from a macro view of your own take of it, and you can hear and hear aspects of what I talk about, but you have focused on other areas in your own lives. And I watch some of your works out there, and you help me understand so much about my own model. Certainly all those who talk about the mud floods and Tartaria, they have enormously helped me understand the big transition that we've been through since the last big reset, which I'm of a mind is probably when what I thought was the big flyby in 1859, which I'm of a mind now was actually Saturn. That was a Saturn moon flyby in 1859. And that is the big confusing aspect. And this is a big part of the story that actually, because when you start looking at all the numerology, and I'm going to tail off with this last little bit just to try and just to give a little bit of an overview of the last 1800 years and the way you could see the last 1800 years. Just to give that final overview, to kind of remember that for me, when I discovered the 3 days of darkness and earthquakes all across Asia, all across Africa, all across Europe, the downfall of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Roman Catholic Church, I can bring to all about to that massive event where we see, you know, all the kind of Greece falling and all the pillars falling down and all the earthquakes and the images of Greece and Rome broken now all stem back from that big earthquake and that big event that was the downfall of the Romans and their big reformation where they changed from a race that decimated as the races that it took over and it ruled by a new whip, the whip of religion, and and so we can see that how we can go forward at that time. We can go forward, you know, we're both next to each other like we are now, and they're causing exactly the same event. We're going for 1,000 years and now we're completely opposite each other. We come to the kind of like the you know, the 1600s, the time of Galileo and that sort of stuff, and then we start getting all these big flybys, and we see all this sort of other kind of occurrence as we come to, you know, the time of what we're calling Uranus, and then Neptune. Is Neptune? Yeah, and then obviously 1930 Pluto, and these kind of like every 84 inventing a new blue planet. But what we haven't really got in this model, which I only brought in recently, is Saturn. And remember, where we talk about this big 84, like it's exactly 84 years now between Carlos Ferrada's big flyby in 1939 and the big flyby that's happening now. It's basically 84 years. It's 84 years between the discovery of Pluto and the discovery of Neptune. You know, Uranus is given an 84 year period. It's 84 years between the first dwarf planet ever discovered and the big sightings that are happening in Isaac Newton's time. You know, Neptune is given, you know, 2 times 84 year orbit. No surprising. Pluto's given 3 times 84 year orbit. You know, this big blue object keeps coming in. But with this big object, so often is seen the moons of Saturn also. You know, we saw the moons of Saturn at the same time as Galileo saw the moons of Jupiter and Jupiter. You know, it's the same in when Neptune was discovered, we were seeing Titan for the first time. And so, you know, these sort of times where we're seeing Titan really massive, we're just understanding that these orbits are that it seems that Saturn. Now think about Saturn. You know, we've got Uranus, we're saying is an 84 year orbit, and Neptune's 2 times 84. Pluto's 3 times 84. But we're understanding that, you know, it's 712, 7 cycles of Jupiter is 84, but then kind of three cycles of Saturn is also 84. So we've got this point where lots of other things seem to be able to come together at this 84 year point. And what's gonna weave together in all of this big cycle is we're gonna start seeing how when we get to this big 84 year cycle, that only periodically comes, you know, it comes, you know, it's coming together at this point here, 1939 as a crossing point, or better still, this model here where you kind of better see that kind of point where we finally sync up after nearly 1800 years, and then we're both next to each other for that point again for quite some time, and but where we're seeing this plunging out of the ecliptic, one crossing the ecliptic there, coming up, and then crossing back down again here 84 years later at this point where we all sync up. This is our big point, just to bring it back to that, just to remember our big cycles in all of this, of what we're really talking about, to come out of the heliocentric model and to start beginning to understand the much bigger astronomical story, that you're really in the mind-bending story, that the super science fiction movie that you're really in, have been forever, and you have doubted you've been in for a very long time because of all the stories that have been thrown onto you since the big hack that seems to have happened with the passage of what I'm of a mind was Titan, the biggest moon of Saturn, back in 1859, that caused the Carrington event. That now we're about to have another Carrington event. And notice how they're saying that this moon that we're going to see is actually, ironically, it's the biggest joke, is the moon that we're supposed to be seeing that's going to be with our moon is actually, they're saying, is the moon of Jupiter. Europa. They're saying that's going to become our visible moon. It's and in many ways, you know, because the big blue object is the big blue Kachina. It's but we're going to see it do its big flyby now, and you know, it's you know, they see how they give you an aspect of truth within it all, because Jupiter that we've been given is the grand deception that keeps you in the heliocentric model, and the heliocentric model, like I say, everyone who shows it as a static sun model, because every planet that goes around it is given a different perihelion point, basically saying that the sun is moving a different direction for each planet. So everyone shows our sun, shows it as a static sun model. We see the sun as a static sun model. And hopefully in all of this, like I say, is you're going to start connecting with your big space of where you're going in this story, and your big soul story is all coming in and coming home. You're coming back to a we're all coming back to ourselves, basically, beyond any story. It's like we're all about to wake up, whether we like it or not, whichever. You know, we're all about to have very stable, clear, simple minds, and be just one fundamental soul channeling into a human being, and no interference, and coming back to our big galactic story, waking up in the realm we really exist, in the story we really exist in. And many souls are going to be going back to this place and beginning new journeys of new soul journeys, and having many visits to Earth in its new journey, and becoming guides to Earth, and all the rest of it. It's just, I think it's going to be business as usual if we can, if the Large Hadron Collider doesn't destroy it all. And I'm hoping it won't. I'm really hoping that that's not going to be the outcome. But big golden rings of light to you. Lots of protection. May you be helped through this pathway. Find your way through this. Trust in all of it. Know that you've done your best. You've all done your best. Can't do more than that. Honey in the heart. And 1,000 thank yous. Good luck.